Greetings, good people. Welcome to day 17 of our 28-day Blackity Black History Month ancestral activation for Black liberation. Today is day 17, as I mentioned, and this whole week we are working with community ancestors that have paved a way in their own unique ways to resist, to actually to do the work for our communities and for our people to resist the oppression or whatever the flavor of oppression was during their time period, because we know it has persisted. And today we are working with, let me just take a pause for the cause and say, put some respect on her name, because at the end of yesterday's video, I kind of paused. I was like, I don't think I'm saying that right, but I was in such a trying to get it finished. But my sister girl, who is on here now, Power Dynamics for Life, howdy, messaged me afterwards because still sharpens steel, and I expect if anyone listening, especially those who are my peoples, this woman here, definitely check out her YouTube channel. She is a PhD, master's and bachelor's in political science. So this is her world. This is her realm. This is the thing that she does. So she let me know, put some respect on my person's name, Fannie Lou Hamer. I don't know what kind of Europeanness, foolishness was coming out my mouth yesterday when I said hammer. Or maybe I was just feeling the intensity of her power being like a hammer. But anyway, I'm gonna pull that back. And put respect on her name because the things that she did for our people are significant. And what I've realized in doing this research, and Dr. Belizaire, who is the Power Dynamics for Life, as she mentioned when she reached out to me, is there's so many other things that Mama Fanny did for us that go unnoticed because really we really focus on her work around voter rights. So I said all that to say she is who we are elevating and honoring today and diving into a little bit more today. And if that's your jam, this working with our ancestors, understanding our history, understanding specifically some of our ancestors who made history, who contributed to the freedoms that we are um, benefiting from today. They gave their lives and their time and their effort and their safety in order for us to have what we have now, all of which is on the table and being and is it potentially at risk. And so click like, click subscribe, click the notification bell so that you know when we go live, and use that as a reminder to tap into yourself, to tap into whatever process your spiritual practice supports, to tap into your ancestors, and to tap into these people who left a legacy for us. Because that's what this whole ancestral activation is about, is tapping into those who did the work that really is actually about to be upon us again, and for us to actually move forward in that. And so we want to tap into that and understand what they did, and tap into that wisdom so we can move forward. um, so who am I? I am Barbara Ohuninifa. I'm an author, a coach, and a speaker, and I work with Black women to help us recognize that we're beautiful, remember that we are powerful, and to be love, period, dot. And each one of those is a significant aspect of our remembering process, because when Black women in particular, when we remember who we are, our position on this planet, our position in humanity, and we can actually move in that way. And when we are healed, we actually have that power to heal our families, our communities, and dare I say this world, because as we can see, it needs some intervention, some divine intervention from all the super friends. And, so that's the work that I do. And if you want to learn more about the one-on-one coaching that I do, there's a link in the description. You can click more into that and read more about that, and set up some time so we can chat about it to see if that would benefit you. But this ancestral activation is for all of us. Black women, yes, because Black women, we educate our children. If a Black woman is educated, all the kids in the household are going to have that level of education, as we talked about yesterday with Tupac Shakur. And so this ancestral activation is for all of us though. So if you're a father, if you any gender that identifies with being Black, then this is for you to tap into and to understand where we come from. So let me get into it. And also, let me just say, this is one of those days because I always have to say, because I don't know if people are coming in new to this series. I'm doing it every other day on camera, off camera, in order to make it through the 28 days because I'm going live with these every day. And it's a lot of energy to put into it. And so the days that I go off camera, it helps me to preserve my energy so I can keep going and show up with consistency. So thank you for your grace. I'm not seeing my beautiful face today. You have to make do with the profile image. So let's get into Mama Fanny. So she was born in 1917 in Montgomery County, Mississippi, and she was the youngest of 20 children. I had to just pause on that one. We give thanks and praise to her mama. I didn't dive into it to see if they were all born of her mother, but that's significant. That's coming out of a time period of enslavement um, and we'll get into it a little bit more, but the whole issue around reproductive rights. So anyway, that just helped me to pause. But she was born into this system, as we know, and we've been talking about over these last almost 3 weeks, this brutal system of Jim Crow. And in Mississippi in particular, it was especially brutal. Mississippi is known for being one of the harshest slave states that we had. And that was evidenced, and I talked about this in my first book a little bit too, because my people are from Mississippi. And so that's evidence in some of the remains of the enslaved Africans that they found. They could tell what had been happening to them from their bones, the abuse that they received, the torture that they endured, all the things. And again, it was pretty brutal in Mississippi, as well as the sharecropping system, because her family was they were sharecroppers. That was the system she was born into, and in and of itself, it was a form of economic oppression, where Black families worked on white-owned land in exchange for a small portion of the crops. And the whole system was just designed to keep Black people in debt and poverty. It was just the next evolution of enslavement. And and when it came to, again, Mississippi being one of those most brutal states with the lynchings, when we got into voter suppression and the segregation laws, it just truly reinforced white supremacy. This is how you can tell I'm tired, because then the words start tripping over themselves. But I'm still here. But white supremacy and the violence around it was extreme in Mississippi. And despite the Voting Rights Act of 1870, in the South in general, Black people were effectively disenfranchised from voting through literacy tests, poll taxes, and just violent intimidation, lynchings. The things that we'll talk about in a bit were the things that we'll talk about in a bit were some of the violence that Mama Fanny endured on her own, herself directly, and um, and honestly, those same rights are at risk today. So the Mississippi Democratic Party was exclusively white, and they refused to allow Black participation in the elections, even though legally they were supposed to. But the KKK, local police, and white landowners, again, we have these different names, but these were all the same people. KKK, local police, white landowners, they all worked together to terrorize Black activists who tried to register to vote. Um, And I wanted to also point out that because this whole first slide, what we're talking about here is setting the context, the foundation of what led her, what circumstances was she born into, what environment and flavor, and I keep saying flavor because oppression has not gone away, it's just morphed and changed. So what was the oppression that she experienced? And part of that was this medical racism, where in 1961, without her consent, she was forcibly sterilized. She was going in to have a tumor removed, And ooh, I'm gonna have to go back to this. Hold on. And White Citizens Council. That was part of who was doing the terrorizing, the KKK, local police, and white landowners. And White Citizens Council. I'll wait for you to just confirm that because I was rolling on. When I'm in the zone and I'm tired, it's hard to even keep track of the comments. But I'm gonna try to look over there because I know Miss Dr. Belizaire is an expert in this. So yes, the White Citizens Council. So they actually had formalized organizations aside from the KKK. They had these formalized organizations to help maintain their status quo, much like, I mean, is it any different than Make America Great Again? I'm just saying. Okay, so back to Mama Fannie and this violation of sterilization. So she was going in to have a uterine tumor removed, and without her consent and without her knowledge, the doctor gave her a hysterectomy. And this was something that was just a part of what was done throughout the South and especially in Mississippi to try to quote unquote control the to control the population, the Black population, and to control Black bodies. Again, still happening. Roe versus Wade, all of the things that have happened, all of the things that were fought for, all the things that she went through are on the table again. And then she personally endured multiple layers of oppression. And part of that was the economic oppression and the forced labor. Again, she spent her early life as a sharecropper, trapped in that system designed to keep Black people financially dependent on white landowners. And that's important to remember as we go forward and talk about some of the policies and the organizations that she created. She was not only about voter registration, she took a two-pronged approach as well. That will remind us of some of the ancestors we talked about last week with the sacred shields. But let me not get ahead of myself. And then there was, again, the voter suppression and that political exclusion. She was violently prevented from exercising her constitutional right to vote. And despite registering multiple times. And when she attempted to register in 1962, she was evicted from the plantation where she had lived and worked for 18 years. And she endured state sanctioned violence. So when she went to another town in Mississippi to register, she was arrested. She was beaten. She was jailed and then beaten. So she was beaten while in prison, while in jail, not only by the police officers, but then there were other Black prisoners who they forced to participate to beat her as well. And this was in 1963. And all of that permanently caused her permanent health damage, permanent kidney damage, lifelong pain. She walked with a limp. I mean, they were trying to kill her. And the only thing that kept her alive, the only thing that kept her grounded was her faith in God. And she sung spirituals. She sung to help her to make it through what would have been an endless night of terror. State sanctioned because she was in prison, she was in jail. And then the misogynoir and the exclusion from the civil rights movement, being a poor, Black, dark-skinned Black woman with a rural accent. A lot of the civil rights leaders, one being very male-driven, you know, this idea of women having an equal part or say in the civil rights movement was not something that was common. And definitely, they tended to go more towards what was publicly acceptable. You know, being able to speak in a very polished way, a certain level of education, a certain look, discriminating really against our own internally. And we saw some of that same thing happen with some of the other radical leaders that we've talked about, of being excluded in many ways from that broader civil rights movement community. And it was no different for her. But within all of this context of all of this horror that she was experiencing, she was a deeply spiritual woman. As I mentioned, when she was getting beat repeatedly into the night, overnight, while in a jail cell by the police officers and the other prisoners that they forced to participate, it was her faith that kept her grounded. It was her faith that gave her the hope that she was going to live to see another day. And that is what fueled her, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go forward, but that's is what fueled her activism because she saw standing up for herself as part of her divine calling. God would not want her or any of us, any of her people, any of our people to endure and suffer without standing up for ourselves, without resistance. To her, it was a moral obligation and a divine calling to do so. And I think, again, it's important as we look at the horrific things that she experienced, both directly and was born into and saw happening around her, she stayed grounded in her faith. She stayed grounded in God, of knowing why she was here. And I think that's another consistent thing with all of these ancestors we've been talking about. They had an understanding of who they were and why they were here, and were willing to risk their lives in order to stand on that. And so we thank Mama Fanny for what she has done for us. So let's move forward and talk a little bit more about what she left behind for us as she was fighting this idea of white supremacy and the Jim Crow apartheid, and fighting exploitive economic exploitation of Black labor, and this lie that America was a functioning democracy. As she did this, what are some of the things she fearlessly fought for Black voting rights? We talked about that a bit ago, and despite life-threatening violence and the systemic barriers, she was fired from her plantation job. She lost her home, like was evicted. She did all of these repercussions from standing up for something that she felt was right. She also she had gone to a meeting of the, and I learned this. You can actually go into um, hear more or even different perspective if you go to Dr. Belazer's channel. She actually has a video where she talks about two of the sacred resistance ancestors that we're talking about this week. So she, in that one video, she talks about Mama Fanny, and she also talks about Harriet Tubman. So you can check her channel out and hear some other details there. But she went to, Mama Fanny went to the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, went to a meeting and learned through them, and they actually wound up recruiting her, SNCC, to be a part of in their field team. And so that was part of how she got involved and got training and understood how to create these mass meetings and how to train other Black people on how to register and how to pass these literacy tests, despite all the constant threats that she received. She also formed and or co-founded the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, and she ran for Mississippi State Senate, all to challenge the all-white political control. The Mississippi Democratic Party, as I mentioned, excluded white people, even the exact opposite of that, excluded Black people, even though the majority, so many people in that state of Mississippi, were Black. They had no representation in that Democratic Party, despite the large population. So in 1964, she co-founded the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party as an independent political party that gave Black Mississippians a voice. And she also led a delegation to the Democratic National Convention in Atlantic City, where she demanded that this new independent party was recognized. And she gave a testimony that was televised that actually exposed a lot of the truths and supposedly stunned America, is what some of the reports say. But y'all knew what was going on. It didn't. What stunned you was somebody had the courage to speak up about it. Four Courageous Women. And one thing I will say, Four Courageous Women is the name of the video on Power Dynamics for Life YouTube page. And I just want to say, I don't know. So when you go live, YouTube automatically sets it where the comments made during the live session are not saved. And I don't know if I went in and changed that setting. So you might have to go back in and put this in. And what I'll do is later on, after I get some rest, is go in and actually put a link in the comments to the video that we're referring to too, because that'll make it easier for folks as well. Because we got to get this knowledge. The sister is an expert in political science and is down for the people, and not only an expert in political science and the constitutional threats that we're under right now, but specifically as it relates to Black people and our freedom. And and was an organizer herself, so we want to tap into that knowledge because we got to know we can trust where it's coming from, and I trust this one. So this is what we're gonna do. So I'll go back in and put that link in. But if you want to make a comment, because I don't think these are gonna save, I gotta remember to go in and change that. Dr. Belizaire, if you want to go in and make the comments again, that would be great. But let's keep it moving. And Mama Fannie also founded the Freedom Farm Cooperative, which was a collective to help poor Black farmers gain land, grow food, and escape this economic dependency. Keeping in mind, remember, she was born into a family, her parents were sharecroppers, and she spent the early part of her life in that system that you the Black farmers farmed the land but didn't own the land or didn't keep any of the profits or hardly any of the food that they actually worked the land to create or to produce. And part of her economic strategy was that we have to get from under the boot of the white landowners. And so this idea of building both independent Black political power with the independent political party that she helped co-found, and also independent economic power by looking at this and creating this Freedom Farm Cooperative. And she also created programs for education, childcare, and housing, again, because she knew political freedom could only go so far if we didn't also have economic security and freedom. And then she took that and everything that she's experienced, everything that the messages that she got from God, the inspiration that she received through those prayers, through her conviction and her beliefs, but she used her power as a weapon for to deliver these speeches that moved people to not only want to listen but also to want to act. And keeping in mind, because of her spiritual commitment, her belief and faith in God, she was a fierce prayer warrior. He could speak. You know how well they'll talk about there's people, especially Black women, who have different gifts. Hers was the power of her words. So whether she was singing spirituals before actually having to give a speech, she was bringing forth that energy. She was bringing forth that divine protection and that voice that would actually reach people and pierce through whatever blockade that people had internally of not actually hearing her. But using that voice, using that spiritual power in her voice was a part of using her voice as a weapon, using her voice to get, and weapon might be too strong of a word, but probably not given what she endured, using her voice as a way to be heard and to make sure that all of the poor Black people in rural South were heard. And this is reminding me of if you were to go back and watch the Zora Neale Hurston video, she endured it was a similar thing where she got ridiculed by others in the Harlem Renaissance because she spoke in the voice of the rural Black people who didn't necessarily have this quote unquote proper English. And that were the majority of our people and the people we came from. And Fannie Lou Hamer, I gotta slow it down. She gave voice to those people, and she spoke in that raw, unpolished, deeply personal way, making her impossible to ignore. So these were the things she did, but what made her strategy successful? She combined grassroots organizing with national political confrontation. So she worked with the people. When I say the people, the farmers, the people who were still sharecropping, the domestic workers. She went in and connected with those people because those were her people. She was them and they were her. But also took that speech, took their message, and took her experiences and her personal lived experience to the national stage, to where it was televised. Went to the national convention, the National Democratic Party convention. So she combined those two methods, which made her work that much more powerful. And again, using storytelling and her own personal stories, her own personal lived experience as a radical tool for change. And I think you may have been speaking about something previously, but we're all talking about the Mama Fanny, a tool of power and resistance. her voice, her faith, all of it combined to do that. And and we've mentioned this, but it's worth repeating. Her activism was rooted in faith, and justice for her was not only moral, but it was spiritual. Now, if you feel like you have a mandate from God to stand on that and that you are protected, you, you have to follow through on that. Faith without works as action is what? Yes. And then again, using her voice, using her stories, being who she brought national attention to this intersectionality before it was even Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw even coined that phrase, intersectionality. She brought it to the forefront between race, gender, and class, all various components of oppression. So poor Black women were receiving the brunt of all of that, of which she was, and she gave a voice to those who were as well. And we thank her. Let's see if there anything else I wanted to talk about in that. No, let's move on. Hmm. Don't she look like somebody's auntie? Oh, well, she is somebody's auntie, but I swear she looked like one of my aunties. Maybe that's what it is. But she had this fire and faith and fearlessness. As we want to look into, because we're doing this with all of these sacred resistance ancestors, what kept them going? Because to resist oppression means your life is always on the line. Means you have to have something deeply motivating to help you keep going, to keep doing what you're doing. And again, her belief in God's justice is what gave her strength to endure. She endured incredible violence, exclusion from her own people, and hardship because they took away everything. The more she fought for us, the more they took from her. But she kept going because she believed in what she was doing, and she believed that eventually this would prevail because she had a very clear understanding that this wasn't going to be an overnight thing. She understood the arc of history and that the efforts that she was putting forth were going to gain momentum and eventually have an impact, and which it did. She also had this belief that suffering without resistance was unacceptable and that fighting back was a moral obligation. We've talked about, I've mentioned this in the previous parts of this of the slides because it's worth mentioning to think about what she endured in that jail cell, getting beaten by grown full-on men, damaging her body indefinitely. Not to mention the medical racism of having the hysterectomy that she did not ask for, did not consent to. The threats, the violence that was inflicted upon her. She had to have an inner resolve that had her and helped her to stand back up again. There's even a quote that she says, and I'm going to screw it up, but she basically says, if I'm going to fall, let me fall 5 feet 4 inches forward rather than fall where she stands. That's not it exactly. I think I got the 5 feet 4 inches right, but you get the point of if you're gonna fall, if you're gonna fall forward because you're gonna keep moving forward. They might try to stop you, but you keep going, and it was a moral obligation for her. And she found strength in her people. Like I said, the other sharecroppers, the domestic workers, the other poor rural people, poor rural Black people, because there were poor rural white people as well, but ours, was the Black people. All of those people and the Black church and the traditions in the Black church and her own spiritual resistance. These are the things that helped her, and she was fueled by this righteous anger. Like, how could you? This is not divine. This is not right. And after being, all of the things that she went through, she still wouldn't be silent. One of the things that she's been found to say is that she's sick of tired of being sick and tired. But she sang again freedom songs before speeches, using the music to uplift herself and those around her. Now we know a Black woman singing some spiritual songs can move energy. can move things. So before she spoke to the masses, before any of her speeches, she was often singing freedom songs. And that was her connection to the Black church and her faith. And she's even been known to use a call and response in to engage audiences, which is again a very not only Black church, but even goes back to continent. This whole idea of call and response and getting the audience to respond and be a part of the speech, be a part of the experience. She used that and it was effective. And again, the freedom songs were a source of strength, and her people were a source of strength. And the women around her. We cannot forget that because a lot of the work that she did, just standing up and having a voice, gave representation to other women and having them to see and know that they too have a voice. Surrounded by people who did not feel like, one, women had a voice, and damn sure not Black women, and damn sure not dark skinned, poor Black women could have a voice, but she showed them that they could. And we also, again, know Black women in the church, we gonna get it done. So those were how people and the environment that she found her strength in. But just like every other that we have talked about so far, not Doctor, Robert F. Williams and Kwame Ture and Tupac Shakur, it's the love for their people that drove them. It was love as a foundation that drove them. And for her, love for her people, but also seeing justice and the work that she was doing as an expression of divine love. That's powerful. Divine love embodied within you can have you do all sorts of things that someone who doesn't understand that relationship with God would be confused about. She was not. She was clear on who she was and what she was here for. And we give thanks for the fire and the faith and the fearlessness that she had, her resolve. So, what was her lasting impact? So many things. And we'll just mention some that, her activism led to real political changes, including the Voting Rights Act, which is at risk on some levels. I am not an expert in this, but I have seen enough and heard enough to know people don't realize. And it's I'm gonna just vent for a quick second when I think about, okay, most of us got it. 92% Black women, we showed up, we voted for humanity. We voted in the interests of what is right. I'm not even going to get into what happened with the other people, but the biggest issue, or that's not even the biggest issue. The issue that I have is the people who didn't show up, the people who didn't vote. After the things that Mama Fannie did in order for us to have access to what was already supposed to be our constitutional right, that we were being intimidated and coerced and violently abused to not leverage, to not get your ass up and go vote. And the thing is, in a lot of states, you don't even have to leave your house to vote. How you can say it really doesn't even matter? You about to lose your right to do anything, and it didn't matter if you showed up. I'm just saying that is infuriating. And now we got 4 years to try to pull it together. Well, slightly less than 4 years, because then there's local elections and things that we can get involved in that can directly impact us as well. But it's frustrating when you understand what we went through to have this capability, this to have this right, and people not leverage it, making excuses. Oh, it doesn't matter. Now the thing is, and then I'm gonna get off the soapbox. She also said being able to vote, having political power was not the only part of the equation. We also needed to build our communities. We needed to build economic strength. Now, my question is for those who did not vote, claiming it wasn't going to matter anyway, were you doing anything? Do you invest in Black businesses? Do you invest in Black led, Black benefiting nonprofits, either through your time or your resources? Do you help make sure that Black dollars circulate in the Black neighborhoods and communities so we can re-strengthen ourselves? All right, I'm done fussing at people. I had to get on the mama soapbox for a minute because it's a real thing. Okay, and then she led the groundwork for Black political empowerment, grassroots organizing, and I'm losing track of where I am. And yes, and the economic cooperative movements. So as we mentioned, that Freedom Farm Cooperative, that was a is a model of collective land ownership that is still inspiring present day Black farming, food sovereignty, and mutual aid efforts. And again, that voter registration work, which is what people tend to focus on as if that was the only thing she did, although it was a huge component. And again, we give thanks for that. Not only the voter registration work, but the independent party that she helped co-found, all of that challenged the system. And that independent party helped to open the way for later movements like the Congressional Black Caucus. And her voter registration work influenced the NAACP and other things that SNCC did, and even modern day voter registration and voter rights organizations. She believed that freedom must be tangible, not just legal, but also the economic and material, which is what I was just fussing about a minute ago. We got to vote, and we got to vote with our dollars. Stay up out that Target. Stay up out of all of them places. I'm just saying. Some going to be harder than others, but put a strategy and a plan together so we can be real clear. I think I mentioned in one of the other, because there's in one of the other videos in this series, there was one town, I believe it was in Mississippi, where they boycotted the people for 6 years. Oh, I know what it was. I mentioned, as a post I saw on social media, so if you go search for that, you can find it. Another sister actually put that together, and let us to know that, like, 6 years? Are we willing to go that hard for our actual liberation? I don't mean to come off as judgy or preachy, but this is so important, and we need to understand how important it is and how critical it is. It's not something that's just gonna go away on its own without us. Just like slavery didn't go away on its own, we made it uncomfortable and unprofitable for them to continue in the way that they continued. Every gain that we've made is because we forced the change to be made. And we're in that same position now, only there's a lot more apathy. So that's what the passion that you hear coming from me in this. I'm gonna keep going because I'll just keep going on a tangent. Okay, now she was a forerunner in this Black feminist thought movement, and I almost don't even want to call it feminist. I almost want to just say womanist, because her work, and again thinking about and talking about and speaking for poor Black women in the movement who didn't have a voice, and again, damn sure not dark skinned poor Black women. What you saw was, the faithful wives next to their husbands. Ooh, let me put that back. The faithful wives next to their husbands, and I don't recall any of them being particularly dark because we know colorism is definitely a thing in our communities. And so challenging both the white feminists and the Black male activists, demanding recognition for Black women, our labor, our voices, our sacrifices, the reproductive injustice, highlighting that, the economic oppression, and the gendered violence, which we still experience today, which still is an issue today. And all of the movements for racial justice, reproductive rights, and economic equity are deeply rooted in the framework that she laid out for us. And we give thanks. So let me go back to the Voting Rights Act in 1964 is being dismantled piece by piece, and it started about 15 years ago by the Supreme Court. That I did not know, and it's fascinating, but also not surprising, because by the time we become aware of something and sound the alarm, it's been something that they've been plotting and planning and doing carefully and quietly over time. So that the alarm should be ringing now, and that's why I fuss, because I'm not seeing the alarm. I'm not seeing people. Very few people are alarmed. Very few people understand what's happening. Very few people, or I'll say many people, assume that all the things that are going to that are going on affect the Hispanic, the Latino community, and not the Black community. because of how they're framing it in the media and what they really focus on in the words that they use. But when you look at just like rolling back DEI and freezing funding and all of that, these Trump supporting uh, white farmers didn't realize that they were a part of that, and they would get frozen as well and potentially lose their farms. And it's a similar thing for us, is that we don't understand that our rights, the very rights that we've been talking about, that our people have fought for, is 1965, not 64. Gotcha. I think it was the Civil Rights Act of 1964. See, this is why we got to know all these things. I don't even know all the things. And again, I went to a historically black college, but I got people like Dr. Belizaire that's going to get us straight, going to put us all the way together. Um, but yeah, we gotta understand what's actually happening, what's coming for us, and then have strategies on what we're going to do to get through it. Okay, let's keep it moving. And just like some of the others that we've talked about, mainstream civil rights history reduces her to just kind of being a side figure. But she was a political strategist. Understand, she co-founded an independent political party in a state like Mississippi. Understanding that context, to do something like that, you had to have brilliant strategy. And then to run for state senate, to take her speech and to go to the Democratic National Convention, she wasn't just emotion, and passion was a part of her delivery and a part of what fueled her, but she was very strategic and analytical in how she approached this. People assumed she was not, because she spoke plainly, because she spoke like where she was from, but it was still impactful, and it was still um, the critical thinking was there. And her radical economic vision, all of this is typically ignored. And again, not that it was a minor thing, but they really focused on her voter registration work, when the voter registration was one prong of a multi-pronged strategy that she implemented. So then, let's keep it going. What are some of the lessons and wisdom that we can glean from Mama Fannie? This was a quote which is so powerful. When I liberate myself, I liberate others. If you don't speak out, ain't nobody going to speak out for you. This is a similar thing that, again, um, Zora Neale Hurston said, if you don't speak up, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it. The whole point is, and I always screw that up, but the sentiment is there. It's not exact quote. But the point is, what they're saying is that you got to be willing to speak up. If you came here and you have a, if you came here, if you listen to me, you came here, you in a body, you here, and you have a thought, you have something to contribute. The fact that you are here and alive while all of this is on the table, while all of this is under siege, while our very rights are being threatened, if you are alive at this time, you have something to contribute in some way, shape, form, or fashion. Tap in to figure out what that was. But Mama Fanny said, as you liberate yourself, meaning speak out, have the bravery, the courage to speak out about your experiences, to speak out in whatever form that you can and that you are able to, you liberate others to do the same. So she knew, as she spoke out about her experiences, she opened the door for others to speak out about theirs, to no longer feel shame about theirs or like they had to hide it, because no one else was going to speak for them, especially Black people, especially Black women. No one is going to speak out for us. We have to speak out for ourselves. So, what are some of the lessons, or the big lesson that I wanted to highlight, is that, again, she believed true liberation means having the power to feed ourselves, to house ourselves, and to sustain ourselves without white control. Because without political rights, without economic independence, still left us vulnerable to white control, still left us dependent on this very same white oppressors we were trying to extract ourselves from. So we needed both of those aspects. And again, that's an aspect of her message and her work that's rarely talked about. All other minorities have the rights they have because of our struggles, persistence, and fight. I know that's right. That highlights the whole I liberate myself, I liberate others. So these very people, a lot of the people who voted um, Republican in this last presidential election don't realize that. Many of the rights that they actually enjoy were won from us. Mm, 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 mm. I had to censor myself on that one. Okay, we're going to keep going. Thank you for that. And she understood that, and this is just kind of highlighting this point, she understood that political rights without the economic independence left us vulnerable. And she realized that owning land, controlling resources, and building self sustaining Black communities was important, as important as voting in the elections and having political positions in these different political parties and in office. There's two components to it. And again, check out the series last week on the sacred shields, because many of those that whole week was about working with ancestors whose work when they were here um, largely talked about or worked on the economic sovereignty or economic freedoms. Not the entire week, because the whole week is about having the financial and all of the resources, the good health, the strategy, the critical thinking, and the tools that we need to actually go after liberation. It's difficult to do that if we aren't well, if we don't have food, if we don't have housing, all of these economic things. It's difficult to go after liberation to Mama Fanny's point, if you still are beholden to these same systems to even feed yourselves or to feed your family or to house yourselves. So we need to look at liberation in both ways, in two ways. And we, again, thank her for that. So her wisdom, speak the truth, even when it shakes the world. And sometimes it will, quite often it will, because what I have found, just even in my own regular old Black life, is that people don't really actually want to hear the truth. They want to hear what feels good. They want to hear what validates whatever belief they have in the world that's around them, but not actually the truth. And it can be said, that there's three truths. There's my truth, your truth, and then the actual truth that's in the middle. But unless you're willing to actually have enough open mind, the critical thinking, the foresight, the intuition, and the openness to receive it, you won't actually hear any of the truths. But even worse, if no one actually speaks the truth, at least their truth, it won't ever be heard. So we have to have that courage. And this has, again, been the theme: love, courage, action. Love for yourself, love for your people, love for humanity, to feel the courage to take that inspired action. And in between, there's some strategic thought, there's some critical thinking, there's some intuition that all mixes in with the divine insight to have you know what steps to take and what moves to make based on what your unique gifts and talents are. Another video from week 1, Sacred Lineage, of working with your people, your lineage, who are the people that you come from, and what gifts and talents did you inherit, or maybe that you haven't explored. All of it works together. You as an individual, all the way through to being a part of our liberation, so that as our next generations, our great great grandkids who we will never physically meet, can have a life, can actually come back to the good condition, come here into the good condition that we helped create and sustain for them. Speak the truth even when it shakes the world, because you know what? Whatever's happening right now, we need to shake it a little bit. So, how do we apply these things and her wisdom to our lives now, to the world that we're in now? Invest in Black led organizations, where that means Black companies, Black institutions, Black cooperatives, Black led and Black benefiting nonprofits, all of the above. She founded the Freedom Farm Cooperative to help ensure Black families had food and had land, basic necessities, tapping back into sacred shields. And today we have to support Black owned businesses, cooperative housing, and community led economic initiatives. Financial independence is part of resistance. And I'll add this 2 cents in there too. If we and I've been saying this almost every day, you really can tell what I feel about this whole, um, Tabitha Brown, Target, and we keep focusing on those 2 aspects or specifically Target, but we know it's a whole list of companies. If we, the argument has been we can't walk away from Target completely because they still have those black brands that are there, and if we walk away, then those brands will lose business. When you think about that logic and the framework of Black liberation and the framework of people like um, Black Mama Fannie, are you really free? Do you really have a black business if your black business cannot exist without the white overlord business, without the Targets and the Walmarts of the world? How much of a black owned, fully black owned, independent business do you have if you are so hurt, if you can no longer get sales from these white institutions? If you can't find a different way, if you can't find a way or make one, shout out Clark Atlanta University. If you can't find a way or make one without having to be dependent on these oppressive structures, are you really self-employed? Are you really an entrepreneur? I'm just saying, marinate on that for a minute. Let's go on. The other thing we can do here and now is defend our voting rights, recognizing that voting alone won't save us, but don't sit on your ass talking about, well, voting ain't gonna matter, and you don't vote, and you don't buy black, and you don't build community, and you don't go volunteer anywhere, and you don't run for your own office, like you do nothing. No. Yes, CAU, baby. And then, yeah, that idea of building grassroots movements, like what she did, in addition to, um, running for local offices, in addition to being a part of the political system, grassroots organizations can also organize to hold political politicians accountable. We still have elections coming up at the local, and I think, is it the representatives in coming up soon? And some of those House positions were borderline flipped to Republican. Even though they're Republican, we can still put pressure on them to act like they got some damn sense. And when it's time for them to get reelected, flip them back to blue and then hold them accountable. None of this is a plug in and walk away situation or scenario. We got to stay engaged. Now, I'm not saying burn yourself out and harm yourself being so engaged in what's going on. You have to find that balance of one, figuring out what it is and who it is that you are and what you're meant to contribute to it and walking in that. Because when you walk in what actually is aligned with who you are, it doesn't tax you as much, it doesn't drain you as much. But even with that, having the balance between being engaged, taking some time out for joy, taking action, taking some time out for rest. It's an ebb and it's a flow. It's not a continuous uh, pressure point from one individual. It's a continuous pressure point from the collective, which is why being a part of a collective is important because it can't be all on you. And when we think about how we can apply what she has brought us and taught us is we need to center Black women. Listen to Black women the first damn time. Stop being afraid of strong Black women. Stop being afraid of Black women in leadership positions. Now, that is something that is notoriously an issue in our Black community. House of Representatives, I got to remember to keep looking at the comments so I can put them up when it's relevant to when I'm saying it. House of Representatives and so that's just next year, 1/3 of the Senate. So we got a year to get it together. It's not all lost. That's why I was like, first I said 4 years of dealing with this, but we can cut that 4 years short. Continue to make it difficult for them to fully implement every aspect of Project 2025, which is crazy. They told us exactly what they were going to do, had a slogan for it, make America great again, because that actually equals all of the things that the ancestors we've been talking about, the lynchings, the Ku Klux Klan, the intimidation at the polls, the beating her within a inch of her life and given permanent damage while she's in prison. All of these different things. False accusations of kidnapping with Robert F. Williams. All of these things is the America Great that they're trying to bring back. And they told us every bit of it and then had their plan leaked about every bit of what they're going to do. And they still got voted in. I don't even understand. Anyway, centering Black women, she was often undermined and dismissed and excluded. And today we know, at least we should know at this point, especially now we should know, actively uplift and protect the voices of Black women. Some of y'all gonna learn. You are many people are already have already fucked around and found out. They're gonna learn even more if they don't eventually start to recognize that you gotta listen to Black women and allow and center our leadership. And then the other thing that we can do to implement and to help uh, apply and implement the wisdom that she left behind for us is using storytelling and our lived experience as a tool for that transformation, for radical transformation. This is something that, we even talked about it yesterday with Tupac, storytelling and talking about the life that he experienced. He gave voice to poor people and especially Black men in our inner cities, the gang members, those in prison, all of the people who looked like him and did not have a voice. He gave voice to them. Mama Fannie gave voice to the rural Black people, and particularly Black women in the South, poor, rural, who didn't have a voice. She used her own personal stories to tell their stories. And this is another area where the courage has to be there because oftentimes when we have our stories of resilience or betrayal or abuse of any kind, whatever our personal stories are, most often we have aspects of them that we want to hide, that we don't want people to know, that we don't even want to face ourselves. And it takes some courage to be able to talk about it in whatever format you choose, whether it's writing a blog, social media post, a video, whatever it is, writing a book, whatever your medium is, to use your words to share your experiences with others, to try to contribute to the radical transformation that we all need. That's happening regardless. It's just which direction is that transformation going in? Do you have the divine moral compass that Mama Fanny had to know justice is a moral obligation, is a divine moral obligation? To know that any suffering for any of us means we all are suffering on some extent, in some extent. Do we have the collective understanding that unless we're all free, unless we all are liberated, none of us are? I can't look over there and say, oh, well, that's too bad for them. They're getting deported. How do you know what's going to happen to us next year? If you got to think about it in that way, but even in a broader, um, more divine way is the only word I can think of at this moment. In a more divine way of thinking, how can you say that person's life doesn't matter as long as I'm comfortable over here? You could, but at the end of the day, how long you gonna be comfortable? We do not know because they're trying to make America great again. But this whole ancestral activation goes beyond the current times of what's happening. It's relevant because we're in such transformational times right now. We're at a critical juncture right now. We could say we actually been in a critical juncture, but because of things that went down on November 6th, it got really, really real. So we have to look at our leaders like Mama Fanny and look at what she left behind for us. Every last one of these people we are talking about left a blueprint for us. They left words of wisdom for us. They left insights for us. We don't have to recreate the wheel. We need to take everything that they've taught us, every bit of wisdom that they left for us, and reform it because now we have digital tools and technologies. We have access to global communities, although we have extreme censorship within that as well. We have a lot of different tools that were not available to us in those time periods, whatever time period of whichever ancestor we're talking about. We have those now. How do we bring those forward in a way that is in alignment with who we are personally, that can impact the future, and that takes advantage and leverages all of the tools and resources that we have right now? So I hope this has been helpful. Um, as I said before in one of the other videos, it's definitely been inspiring for me to go through this process. Again, a lot of these, some of these are names that I heard, obviously, having, went to historically Black college and just lived my whole Black life in a Black household of people who were politically aware, but a lot of them I didn't know. And even the ones that I did know, it's been so long since I engaged with their stories and really dived into it, especially at this ripe old age of really seeing the impact of what they did and the importance of it is hitting a whole lot different now. And so I hope this series, any part of this information, is helping you to honor the ancestor, to honor Mama Fanny, to honor all of the people that we're talking about, and to figure out what your place is in all of this and how you're going to move forward. Because at the end of the day, faith without works is what? We got to do some things. We got to actually make things move. We have to make what they're trying to do so uncomfortable that it will not work. Um, and so with that, we're going to wrap up. I'm going to put a time frame on it now because I'm still creating a single meditation to cover all of the resistance fighters that we are working with this week. I didn't want to do it individually, one, because the presentations are already pretty long and it's more important to get, or not more important, it's important to get the wisdom, their work communicated and encapsulated in these sessions, and then go back and work with the meditation to help you tap into this same energy within yourself, to help you tap into that wisdom and seal that wisdom within yourself so that you can move forward. But so much of some of the, we started off with armed self-defense and later in, as we round out this week, we'll talk about some of the uprisings that actually led to slavery being abolished, the uprisings that were happening, the discomfort that was created that made slavery something that they couldn't continue with in the same form. We're going to talk about those. And with all of that, and in between all different forms of resistance, like using your voice and using your words and helping others. But because this energy can be kind of hot, I wanted to have a more in-depth meditation to kind of soothe and ease into it. Because none of these defenders, none of these resistance fighters, sacred resistance fighters, did what they did out of revenge or retaliation. Everything is steeped in love, courage, action. So that will be the basis of the meditation. So I'll commit to getting that up by Wednesday. Your girl just been running low on steam, but we're going to get it in because I think it's an important aspect to make sure that that's a resource and a tool that's available, and I'll add it to the playlist when it's there. So hopefully you've clicked the like and subscribe and the bell so you'll know when it's actually there. So we are going to take a couple of deep breaths though. I always need that at the end just to give thanks to Mama Fanny and all of the work that she has did and what she endured on our behalf out of love for us because we love you too. So we'll take a deep breath in and hold, breathing in love, letting go of fear. And another one, deep breath in, breathing in courage and hold and exhale, letting go of fear. And inhale, inspired action, and release apathy. Thank you. And I will see you tomorrow. Y'all go check out Power Dynamics for Life. I'm gonna try to get her on here because we need to understand. If nothing else, I need to understand some of these amendments and the actual things that are on the table that we'll see flash through news. But unless you understand what it means, it really doesn't fully hit. We need to dive into that. So definitely check out her page and we got questions. All right, thanks y'all. And as always, until next time, take good care of you. Peace.